I'm Allison Gardner, 57, and until this morning, I had spent 7 consecutive Mother's Days completely alone. Today, as I sat on the deck of my new beach house, watching waves crash against the shore, a place I had saved for 5 years to afford, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found Madison, Tyler, and Ryan, my 3 adult children, standing there with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Happy Mother's Day. We thought we'd visit your new place," Madison said, strangely emphasizing those last 2 words. My heart both soared and sank at once. Before I dive into what happened next, where are you watching from today? If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life family dramas like mine. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this unexpected reunion turned out. The beach house was my dream, one I had clung to through 8 years of solitude after my divorce from Richard. We'd been married for 25 years when I discovered his affair with Natalie, his 29-year-old secretary. The pain of his betrayal was excruciating, but what broke me completely was how quickly and thoroughly he turned our children against me. Richard was a successful investment banker who never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of his financial prowess. When our marriage fell apart, he crafted a masterful narrative that painted me as the villain who wanted to destroy our family. "Your mother chose to leave us," he told our children, conveniently omitting the part about his 2-year affair. "She wants half of everything I've worked for while she just stayed home." The truth was that I had put my teaching career on hold to raise our children, returning to work as a high school English teacher only when Ryan, our youngest, started middle school. By the time of our divorce, I had been teaching for 12 years, but my salary as an educator was a fraction of Richard's income. Richard used his wealth as a weapon. For Madison's 30th birthday, he bought her a brand new luxury SUV. When Tyler graduated with his MBA, Richard provided the seed money for his business venture. For Ryan's college graduation, there was a lavish European trip. Meanwhile, I sent heartfelt cards with modest gift cards that I could afford on my teacher's salary, which often went unacknowledged. The pattern became painfully clear within the first year after our divorce. My phone calls went unanswered. Birthday invitations were declined with flimsy excuses. Thanksgiving and Christmas were spent at Richard and Natalie's expansive new home. And Mother's Day, the day that should celebrate our connection, became just another Sunday. I spent grading papers and trying not to cry. I remember the first Mother's Day after the divorce. I had made reservations at a nice restaurant, hoping at least one of my children would join me. I sat at that table alone for 45 minutes before paying for my untouched glass of wine and leaving with what dignity I could muster. Later that evening, Madison posted photos on social media of a Mother's Day celebration with Natalie, who was only 7 years her senior. All 3 of my children were smiling around a beautifully set table in Richard's dining room. By the 3rd Mother's Day alone, I stopped making plans. By the 5th, I stopped hoping for a text message. By the 7th, I had almost convinced myself that the day didn't matter to me anymore. Through it all, I kept teaching, kept saving, and kept my dream alive. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, driving the same car I'd had since before the divorce. My colleagues couldn't understand why my children never visited, and eventually, I stopped mentioning them to avoid the pitying looks. 5 years ago, I started putting aside every extra dollar toward my beach house fund. I clipped coupons, took on summer school teaching for additional income, and tutored students on weekends. Then, 3 months ago, my Aunt Louise passed away and left me an unexpected inheritance of $60,000. It wasn't a fortune, but combined with my savings, it was enough for a down payment on a small beach house in a quiet coastal town 3 hours from the city. The first betrayal that truly shattered my heart wasn't the divorce itself, it was realizing my children never once visited my apartment in 8 years, despite my countless invitations. Yet they never missed one of Richard and Natalie's extravagant parties in their mansion. They claimed my place was too far at a 30-minute drive, while happily making the hour-long journey to Richard's house in the opposite direction. When I finally signed the papers for my beach house, I did it alone. There was no one to celebrate with, no one to share my accomplishment with. I didn't even tell my children about it. After years of rejection, I had learned to protect my heart by expecting nothing from them. So when they showed up unannounced on my doorstep that Mother's Day morning, Their sudden interest in my life, particularly in my new property, immediately set off warning bells. The question was, what did they really want? The living room of my beach house felt smaller with all three of my children occupying it. Madison, at 32, looked polished and expensive in her designer sundress, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves. She moved around the room with calculated enthusiasm, exclaiming over the ocean view while her eyes seemed to be appraising the property value. "Mom, this place is gorgeous. The real estate in this area has absolutely exploded in the past few years, hasn't it?" she asked, running her manicured fingers along the quartz countertop in the kitchen. "How many square feet is it? When did you close on it?" Tyler, 29, barely made eye contact with me as he sprawled on my new sofa, his attention fixed on his phone. Every few minutes, he'd look up to ask a question about the house, the property taxes, the HOA fees, whether I had considered renting it out in the off-season. "You know, Mom," he said during a rare moment when his phone was face down, "I've been looking into vacation property investments. My new business venture is in the early stages, just needing a little capital to really take off. The potential is incredible. We're talking triple-digit returns in the first 2 years." Only Ryan, my youngest at 26, seemed genuinely happy to see me. He gave me a real hug when he arrived, not the air kiss Madison had offered or the awkward shoulder pat from Tyler. His eyes, so like mine, held something between apology and concern. "The place is beautiful, Mom," he said quietly as we stood on the deck while his siblings explored inside. "You deserve this." "I'm sorry I haven't been around much." I squeezed his hand in response, afraid my voice would betray the emotion building in my throat. One sincere moment from one child shouldn't have felt so monumental, but after years of drought, even a drop of affection felt like a downpour. Back inside, Madison dominated the conversation, asking about my retirement plans, whether I had updated my will recently, and if I had considered the financial implications of maintaining such a large property at your age. "I'm 57, Madison, not 87, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "And it's hardly a mansion, it's 3 bedrooms with a nice view." "Still, Mom," she pressed, "it's a lot for one person. And the market is so hot right now. If you sold, you could make a significant profit." While I prepared lunch in the kitchen, I overheard Madison's hushed phone conversation from the hallway. "Yes, Dad, we're here now." "No, she hasn't mentioned anything about finances yet." "Yes. The place is actually nice. Right on the beach." "I know. I was surprised too. Don't worry, we'll feel things out." "Yes, Tyler is going to bring up his business proposal after lunch." The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a Mother's Day reconciliation. This wasn't about reconnecting with me. Richard had sent them here after finding out about my beach house purchase, undoubtedly through the small town's active gossip network where we had all lived during their childhood. I gripped the edge of the counter, breathing deeply to steady myself. 8 years of absence, 7 Mother's Days alone, countless unanswered calls, and now they show up because Richard wanted information about my financial situation. This was the second betrayal unfolding before my eyes. Discovering my children had only come because Richard had orchestrated this reconciliation after learning about my beach house. They weren't here to repair our relationship, they were here on a reconnaissance mission. When I brought the sandwiches to the table, I wore a pleasant mask over my breaking heart. "So," I said calmly, "tell me what's really going on here." The weekend unfolded like a masterclass in emotional manipulation. My children stayed, claiming they wanted to spend quality time with me after too many years apart. But their true intentions became increasingly transparent with each passing hour. Madison appointed herself my personal financial advisor, despite having no background in finance beyond marrying a wealthy man. She followed me around the house, dropping comments like landmines in casual conversation. "Mom, this staircase is so steep. Have you thought about what happens when you can't manage them anymore?" she asked while we brought sheets to make up the guest rooms. "The maintenance on oceanfront property is astronomical," she mentioned over coffee. "Salt air corrodes everything. Bradley's colleague had to replace all his window frames after just 5 years. At your age, you should be downsizing, not taking on a mortgage," she said during our walk on the beach. Retirement is right around the corner. At 57, with 10 years of teaching still ahead before retirement, I hardly considered myself decrepit. But Madison spoke as if I should be shopping for nursing homes rather than beach houses. Tyler's approach was different but equally transparent. On Saturday afternoon, he cornered me in the kitchen with his sob story while I prepared dinner. "Things have been really tough, Mom," he confided, his voice low and serious. "The business is right on the edge of a major breakthrough, but my investors pulled out last minute. I've got everything riding on this, my savings, my credit. I even took out a second mortgage on my condo." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that I felt a chill. "I just need a bridge loan to get through the next 6 months. After that, the profits will be pouring in, and I could pay you back double what you invest." When I asked for details about his business plan, his answers were vague buzzwords about disruptive technology and market penetration. Just like his father, Tyler mistook confidence for competence and charisma for substance. Ryan was noticeably uncomfortable with his siblings' tactics. He spent most of his time on the deck with his guitar, avoiding the uncomfortable scenes playing out inside. On Saturday night, after Madison and Tyler had gone to bed, he joined me in the kitchen as I washed the dinner dishes. "I'm sorry about them," he said quietly, picking up a towel to dry. "They're not being subtle, are they?" "Not particularly," I answered, handing him a plate. "Were you all planning this ambush together?" Ryan's silence told me everything. "How did you even know about the house?" I asked. "Dad told us," Ryan admitted. "One of his golf buddies has a place a few streets over. He saw you moving in and mentioned it to Dad." The pieces clicked into place. Richard had always been obsessed with knowing my financial situation, even years after our divorce. During our marriage, he had handled all our money, giving me an allowance for household expenses while making all investment decisions himself. After the divorce, he had been furious that I wouldn't share details of my teacher's pension or inheritance from my parents. Later that night, I couldn't sleep and went downstairs for tea. As I approached my small home office off the living room, I heard the sound of papers rustling. Through the partially open door, I saw Madison going through my desk drawers, examining documents with the aid of her phone flashlight. I pushed the door fully open. "Looking for something?" She didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Oh, Mom. I couldn't sleep and thought I might borrow a book." Your office door was open. My desk contained no books, only financial documents, property papers, and my will. Madison's skills at deception were as poor as her excuse. "We'll talk in the morning," I said firmly, standing in the doorway until she left. The next day, over breakfast on the deck, Madison and Tyler executed their final play. They presented what they called a family investment opportunity. I would sell my newly acquired beach house, invest the proceeds in Tyler's business venture, and move in with Madison and Bradley temporarily until I could find a more age-appropriate living situation. "It's the perfect solution, Mom," Madison said, her voice dripping with false concern. "You'd get a great return on investment through Tyler's business, you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this huge house, and we'd all benefit as a family. Plus, you'd get to spend more time with us," Tyler added, though his eyes remained fixed on his phone. As I sat there, watching the waves crash against the shore of the home I had worked so hard to obtain, something inside me hardened. I recognized these tactics. I had lived with them for 25 years of marriage. Richard had always made financial decisions sound like they were for my benefit when they really served only him. That evening, while preparing some snacks, I overheard Madison and Tyler on the deck, thinking I couldn't hear them through the open kitchen window. "She's being so selfish," Madison hissed. "After everything Dad did for her during the divorce, the least she could do is help the family out. This is her chance to do what's right for once in her life. Dad says she got a fortune in alimony," Tyler replied. "Where did all that money go if she was living in that crappy apartment all these years? She must have been hoarding it." There was no alimony. Richard had fought viciously through 3 attorneys to ensure that. What I received was half the value of our family home, which he kept, and a small percentage of his retirement accounts, proportional to the years of our marriage standard in our state. The beach house represented every penny I had in the world, plus a mortgage I would be paying well into my 70s. This was the 3rd betrayal. Hearing my own children discuss me as if I were a selfish obstacle to their financial desires, believing lies their father had told them about money I never received. I stood in my kitchen, hands trembling with anger but mind suddenly clear. I had spent 8 years hoping for reconciliation, bearing their rejection with the patient understanding of a mother who would forever forgive her children. But in that moment, I realized I had been allowing myself to be used and manipulated first by Richard, and now by the children he had poisoned against me. It was time to stop being a doormat and start fighting back. Sunday evening, I decided to host a proper Mother's Day dinner. If this was to be a battlefield, I would choose the terrain. I invited my children to bring their partners, ostensibly to make it a real family celebration. Madison immediately called Bradley to join us from the city. Tyler invited his girlfriend Fiona, who arrived wearing clothes that cost more than a month of my teacher's salary. Ryan came alone, having recently ended a relationship. I spent the afternoon preparing my mother's recipe's pot roast with roasted potatoes, homemade rolls, and strawberry shortcake for dessert. These were dishes I had lovingly made for family dinners throughout my children's childhoods, meals that had once brought us together around our table with laughter and conversation. The elaborate spread was my way of demonstrating what they had been missing all these years, the mother who had always nourished and cared for them, despite their absence from my life. It was both an offering and a reminder of what they had thrown away. Madison's husband Bradley arrived first, his luxury car purring into my driveway like an expensive cat. He was 10 years older than Madison, with the artificially tanned skin and bleached teeth of someone fighting too hard against aging. He greeted me with the condescending air of a man who believes his wealth makes him inherently superior to others. "Allison, the beach bungalow is adorable. Very quaint," he said, handing me a bottle of wine that he immediately informed me had been rated 96 points by some important wine critic. "Madison tells me you're a teacher? How fulfilling that must be. Shaping young minds, instead of chasing the almighty dollar like the rest of us." Tyler's girlfriend Fiona was cut from similar cloth, beautiful in a manufactured way, with the vacant eyes of someone who had never had to think too deeply about anything. She complimented my cute little kitchen while making it clear she never cooked in her own. Ryan helped me in the kitchen, the only one who seemed genuinely invested in making the evening pleasant. "I'm sorry about them," he whispered as we arranged food on serving platters. "They're not usually this obvious." "I think they are," I replied quietly. "I'm just not usually here to see it." The dinner began pleasantly enough with superficial conversation about the unusually warm spring weather and compliments on the food. But as the wine flowed, particularly into Bradley, the conversation inevitably turned to money. "So, Allison," Bradley said, swirling his third glass of wine, "this place must have set you back a pretty penny. Beachfront property is going through the roof these days." "I'm fortunate to have found it when I did," I answered noncommittally. "Madison and I have been looking at investment properties in this area," he continued. "The appreciation potential is incredible. If you ever decide to sell, you could make a killing." Madison shot him a warning glance, clearly thinking he was being too direct too soon. "I just bought it 3 months ago," I said. "I'm not planning to sell." But realistically, Tyler jumped in. "It's a lot of house for one person. Wouldn't you be happier in something more manageable? Maybe closer to family?" I took a slow sip of wine. "This is exactly what I want, and I'm managing it just fine." Bradley, now fully uninhibited by alcohol, leaned forward conspiratorially. "So when do you think you'll downsize from this place? 5 years? 10? Might as well cash out when the market's hot." The tension in the room was palpable. Ryan stared at his plate. Fiona examined her manicure, and Madison kicked Bradley under the table not subtly enough. "I won't be cashing out," I said calmly. "This house represents years of saving and planning. It's my home, not an investment property." "Mom," Madison said with forced patience, "we're just trying to help you make smart financial decisions. Real estate is Tyler's and Bradley's area of expertise." "Is it?" I asked, looking directly at Tyler. "I thought your business venture was in tech?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "It's tech adjacent. The point is, we know about market timing." "What exactly is your business, Tyler?" I pressed. "You've mentioned needing capital several times, but you've never actually explained what you're developing." "It's complicated," he hedged. "Proprietary technology. I can't really get into specifics." "Try," I said firmly. The room fell silent as Tyler fumbled through a description so vague it could have applied to virtually any business. Words like synergy and disruption floated disconnected from any concrete product or service. So you want me to sell my house and invest in something you can't even explain clearly? I concluded when he finally trailed off. Jesus Christ, Mom, Madison interjected. Why are you being so difficult? We're trying to help you while also supporting Tyler's future. It's what families do. Is it? I asked, setting down my fork. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you've suddenly remembered you have a mother only because she has something you want. That's not fair, Madison snapped. What's not fair is spending 7 Mother's Days alone while you celebrated with your father and his mistress, I replied, my voice finally betraying the hurt I'd carried for years. Don't call Natalie that, Madison said sharply, and don't blame Dad for the divorce. That was your choice. Was it my choice to have a husband who cheated for 2 years? Was it my choice to have children who abandoned me the moment I stopped being financially beneficial to them? Bradley, drunk and oblivious to the emotional minefield he was stumbling into, chuckled and said, Well, to be fair, you're financially beneficial now. That's why we're all here, isn't it? The room froze. Even in his inebriated state, Bradley seemed to realize he had said the quiet part out loud. Madison quickly tried to recover. What Bradley means is that we're happy to see you doing well financially because we care about you. No, I said quietly. Bradley was being honest for the first time tonight. This reunion isn't about reconnecting with me. It's about my beach house and what you think you're entitled to from it. Mom, that's not Tyler began, but I cut him off. Tell me the truth, just once. Did your father send you here after he found out about my beach house? The silence was damning. Finally, Madison spoke, her voice hard. Dad needs help, Mom. He has some financial issues right now. He thought since you're obviously doing well enough to buy beach property, you might be willing to help the father of your children. And there it was, the fourth betrayal laid bare. Richard, the wealthy investment banker who had portrayed me as a money-hungry ex-wife to my children for years, was now sending those same children to extract money from me. Get out, I said quietly. Mom, be reasonable. Tyler started. Everyone except Ryan. Get out of my house, I repeated, standing up. Now, Madison and Tyler stared at me in shock, unused to hearing firm boundaries from the mother they had walked all over for years. You know what? Fine, Madison finally spat, throwing her napkin down. Keep your precious beach house. But don't expect us to take care of you when you're old and alone. I've been alone for 8 years, I replied steadily. I think I'll manage. After they stormed out, slamming doors and speeding away in their luxury cars, I sat back down at my beautiful Mother's Day table, now half empty. The carefully prepared meal lay barely touched. Ryan remained in his seat, looking stricken. You can go too, I told him quietly. I understand if you need to. I'm staying, he said firmly, reaching for my hand across the table. If that's okay with you. Only when I heard his words did the tears finally come. 8 years of rejection and loneliness pouring out as my youngest child held my hand across a ruined Mother's Day dinner. The morning after the disastrous dinner, I awoke to the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, I thought the previous day had been a nightmare. Then the memories crashed back: Madison's anger, Tyler's manipulations, Bradley's drunken truth-telling. I found Ryan in the kitchen, scrambling eggs and toasting bread. You didn't have to do this, I said, accepting the mug of coffee he offered. Least I could do after yesterday, he replied, his smile sad but genuine. I'm sorry about everything, Mom. Not just yesterday, all of it. The years of not being there. The Mother's Days, everything. We took our breakfast to the deck, where the morning sun sparkled on the waves. For several minutes, we ate in comfortable silence, the kind that had always existed between us. Of my 3 children, Ryan had inherited my introspective nature, while Madison and Tyler took after their father's more aggressive personality. Why did you stay? I finally asked. You could have left with them. Ryan set down his fork. Because they're wrong, and I've been wrong too. I've known it for a while, but I was too cowardly to stand up to them, to Dad. What do you mean? Ryan took a deep breath. There's a lot you don't know, Mom. About Dad. About why Madison and Tyler are really here. Over the next hour, as our coffee grew cold, Ryan revealed family secrets that explained the past 8 years. Richard, the financial wizard who had always flaunted his success, had a gambling problem that had grown increasingly severe after our divorce. The pressures of maintaining his lifestyle with Natalie, 20 years his junior and accustomed to luxury, had pushed him to make risky investments. He lost almost everything in a bad real estate deal about 3 years ago, Ryan explained. He's been borrowing money, using his house as collateral, taking cash advances on credit cards, anything to keep up appearances and hide it from Natalie. I had no idea, I said, genuinely shocked. During our marriage, Richard had been controlling with money, but never reckless. None of us did. At first, Ryan continued. He told Madison and Tyler that he was having temporary cash flow issues because you'd taken him to court for more alimony. My jaw dropped. There was no alimony. Ever. I know that now, Ryan nodded. But they believed him because they always believe him. He's been telling them for years that you received massive payments you've been hiding. This revelation, the fifth betrayal, hit me like a physical blow. While I had been clipping coupons and working extra jobs to afford my modest apartment, my ex-husband had been telling our children I was secretly wealthy but too selfish to help them. Why didn't you believe him? I asked Ryan. He looked away, embarrassment crossing his face. I did, at first. But about 2 years ago, I needed money for studio time. I was recording some original songs. Dad said he couldn't help because you had bled him dry. Ryan had been pursuing a music career since college, working side jobs to support his passion. I had always sent what little I could to help, though it was never much. I was desperate. So I went to check county records, he continued. I wanted to see the divorce settlement myself, thinking maybe I could convince you to help me if I confronted you with how much you'd gotten. That's when I saw the truth. There was no alimony. The house went to Dad. Your retirement savings were minimal. You got basically nothing, Mom. Tears welled in my eyes. Why didn't you come to me then? Shame, he admitted. I was ashamed I had believed him, ashamed I had abandoned you. By then, it had been 6 years. I didn't know how to undo that kind of damage. So what changed? Why are you here now? Dad called us all to his house last week. He told us about your beach house purchase. He was furious, demanding to know where you got the money. He said you must have been hiding assets during the divorce. That's when he came up with this plan for us to visit on Mother's Day, to find out about your finances and convince you to sell the house and invest with Tyler. And Madison and Tyler agreed? Ryan nodded. Dad promised Madison he'd help with Bradley's tax problems if she succeeded. He told Tyler he'd connect him with real investors for his business idea. What business idea? I asked. Tyler couldn't even explain it coherently. Ryan gave a humorless laugh. That's because there isn't one. Tyler lost his job 8 months ago and has been pretending to run a startup to save face. Dad knows this but is using the promise of connections to manipulate him. The picture becoming clearer with each revelation, I asked the question that had been haunting me for years. What about Natalie? Do the kids treat her like a mother? Ryan looked uncomfortable. Not really. She and Dad fight constantly about money. She's been threatening to leave him for her personal trainer. Madison and Tyler are nice to her face because Dad expects it, but they don't respect her. And Richard's relationship with her? It's toxic, Ryan said flatly. He controls her the way he controlled you through money, but she fights back more than you did. Their relationship is just power struggles and manipulation. As the morning stretched into afternoon, Ryan and I continued our conversation, filling in 8 years of missed communications. I learned that Richard had intercepted gifts I had sent the children early after the divorce. I discovered that he had told them I refused invitations to events I had never been invited to. Ryan became my first real ally in nearly a decade of isolation. By evening, we had formed a tentative plan for how to handle Madison and Tyler, and more importantly, Richard, who was clearly the puppet master pulling their strings. They need to see the truth about Dad, Ryan said as we cleaned up from dinner. But they won't believe it coming just from me. They're too invested in his version of reality. Then we'll need evidence they can't ignore, I replied, a new determination hardening within me. It's time I stopped being the passive victim in this story. That night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully in my beach house, no longer alone with my pain. The path ahead would be difficult, but having one child back in my life, one person who finally saw the truth, gave me strength I hadn't felt since before the divorce. Tomorrow, I would begin fighting back against the man who had stolen not just my financial security, but something far more precious, my relationship with my children. The morning after Ryan's revelations, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. This situation demanded my full attention. Ryan took a few days off from his job at a music store, and together we began our investigation into Richard's current financial situation. Where do we start? Ryan asked as I set up my laptop on the dining table. County records, I replied. If Richard has been using his house as collateral, there will be public records of the loans and liens. Ryan and I spent hours combing through online databases, documenting every financial footprint Richard had left. What we discovered was staggering. The house he had fought to keep in our divorce, the family home where I had raised our children, had been remortgaged 3 times. The most recent loan, taken out just 6 months ago, was from a high-interest lender known for catering to desperate borrowers. Look at this, Ryan said, pointing to his screen. Dad's investment firm downsized 2 years ago. His name isn't on their website anymore. Further digging revealed that Richard had been quietly selling off assets, his vacation property in Colorado, his boat, even the vintage car collection he had prized above almost everything. The man who had portrayed himself as financially invincible to our children was, in reality, drowning in debt. He's been living a lie, I murmured, scrolling through records of tax liens and judgments, and dragging the kids into his deception. Madison and Tyler won't believe this without proof they can't deny, Ryan warned. Dad's had them under his thumb for too long. Then we'll give them proof, I said, reaching for my phone. I'm calling Stanley. Stanley Friedman had been my divorce attorney 8 years earlier, a kind but fierce advocate who had warned me that Richard would try to hide assets. He hadn't been able to prove it then, but he had always suspected Richard of financial impropriety. Allison Gardner, he said warmly when he returned my call. It's been too long. How are you? After bringing him up to speed on the situation, I asked the crucial question. Stanley, is there any way to find out if Richard violated the terms of our divorce settlement? Possibly, he replied thoughtfully. The settlement required him to maintain college funds for the children and pay off certain joint debts. If he liquidated those accounts or defaulted on those payments, that would constitute a violation. Stanley agreed to investigate, and 2 days later, he called with news that confirmed my suspicions. Richard had indeed violated several financial terms of our divorce agreement. The college funds he had been required to maintain for our children had been emptied 5 years ago. The joint credit card debt he had agreed to pay had gone into collections, damaging my credit rating in the process. This discovery represented the 6th betrayal. Learning that Richard had violated our divorce settlement by draining our children's college funds money that was legally theirs, not his. Armed with documentation from Stanley and our own research, I invited Madison and Tyler to dinner at a neutral location, an upscale restaurant in the city where the public setting would hopefully prevent another explosive scene. To my surprise, they both agreed to come. Madison arrived first, her demeanor noticeably cooler than during her Mother's Day visit. She refused my attempt at a hug, sitting stiffly across from me. I'm only here because Ryan insisted, she informed me. I have nothing to say to you after how you treated us. Tyler arrived 15 minutes late, looking haggard. Without his father present, some of his bravado had faded. He ordered a whiskey before even looking at the menu. When Ryan joined us, completing our family circle for the first time in years, I felt a strange mix of determination and sadness. These were my children. Yet 2 of them were now practically strangers, poisoned against me by years of manipulation. I asked you here because there are things you need to know, I began after we had ordered. Things about your father that will be difficult to hear. Here we go, Madison said, rolling her eyes. Another attack on Dad to make yourself look better. Not an attack, I corrected gently. Just facts. With documentation you can verify yourselves. I slid folders across the table to each of them. Your father has been lying to you about our divorce settlement. There was never any alimony. I never received a fortune that I've been hiding. Tyler scoffed but opened his folder, his expression changing as he scanned the official court documents. He's also been lying about his own financial situation. I continued. The house has been remortgaged multiple times. He's facing potential bankruptcy, and possibly worse. Worse? Madison questioned, her composure slipping as she examined the county records. Securities fraud, Ryan interjected quietly. I spoke with one of his former colleagues yesterday. There's an investigation pending. Madison shook her head vehemently. This is ridiculous. Dad would never. He already has, I interrupted, pointing to the document in her hand. That's the record showing he emptied both your college funds 5 years ago, funds he was legally required to maintain under our divorce agreement. Money that was meant for your education, that belonged to you. Tyler's face had gone pale. But Dad paid for my MBA. He gave me startup money. No, I said gently. He gave you your own money and took credit for it, and I suspect there wasn't nearly as much as there should have been after years of investment growth. The dinner continued in this vein, with Madison and Tyler alternating between denial, anger, and dawning realization as they examined the evidence before them. I presented facts without accusation, allowing them to reach their own conclusions about the father they had idolized. Madison remained the most resistant. Even if some of this is true, it doesn't excuse you abandoning us after the divorce. I never abandoned you, Madison, I said softly. I called every week. I sent birthday and Christmas gifts. I invited you to every holiday dinner. You chose not to come because Dad said you didn't want us around except when it was convenient for you, she shot back. He said you refused his invitations for us to visit together. There were never any invitations, I replied, my heart breaking at this new revelation of Richard's manipulation. I begged to see you all. I offered to drive anywhere, anytime, just to have lunch with you. By the end of the meal, no minds had been completely changed, but seeds of doubt had definitely been planted. Tyler, in particular, seemed shaken by the revelations about his business funding. I need time to process this, he said as we parted outside the restaurant. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was the first crack in the wall Richard had built between us. Madison was less receptive. I'll look into these claims, she said stiffly. But Dad has always been there for us, which is more than I can say for you. As she walked away, Ryan squeezed my hand. Give her time, Mom. The truth is hard when you've believed a lie for so long. That night, as Ryan drove back to the city and I returned to my beach house alone, I felt both drained and strangely empowered. For years, I had accepted the role of outcast in my own family. Now, I was finally fighting back, not just for myself, but for my children who had been manipulated as pawns in Richard's vindictive game. The next step would be the hardest. Confronting Richard himself. 3 days after the dinner with my children, as I was grading papers on my deck, a familiar BMW pulled into my driveway. Even before the driver emerged, I knew it was Richard. Some part of me had been expecting this visit since my dinner with the children. He looked older than when I'd last seen him 2 years ago at Ryan's music showcase, an event where he'd pointedly ignored my presence. His designer suit couldn't hide the weight he'd lost, and new lines mapped his face. Despite these signs of aging, he approached with the confident swagger that had once attracted me to him decades ago. Allison, he called, his voice carrying across the yard with practiced charm. Beautiful place you have here. Ocean views don't come cheap these days. I set aside my grading and stood, determined not to let him see me flustered. Hello, Richard. I'd ask what brings you here, but I think we both know. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Can't a man visit his ex-wife? Especially when she's been filling our children's heads with nonsense. You mean facts. With documentation? I replied calmly. Please, come in. I've been expecting you. Inside, I offered him coffee, which he declined, preferring instead to wander my living room, assessing the furnishings with the calculating eye of someone appraising assets. So this is what teaching high school English pays for these days, he remarked, running his finger along my bookshelf. I'm impressed, or I would be if I believed you bought this on a teacher's salary. 25 years of marriage to a financial expert taught me the value of saving and careful investment, I replied. Unlike some people, I live within my means. His jaw tightened at the veiled reference to his financial troubles. Cut the crap, Allison. Where did you really get the money? Were you hiding assets during our divorce? Because if you were, my lawyer will have a field day with that information. I laughed a genuine laugh that clearly unsettled him. That's rich coming from the man who hid our savings in offshore accounts. No, Richard, everything I have came from honest work and saving, plus a small inheritance from Aunt Louise. Ah, the convenient dead relative, he sneered. How fortunate for you. What do you want, Richard? I asked, cutting to the chase. You didn't drive 3 hours to discuss my aunt. His demeanor shifted suddenly, charm replacing hostility like a mask sliding into place. He sat on my sofa, patting the space beside him in an invitation I declined. Look, Allie, he said, using the nickname he knew I had always hated. We've had our differences, but we're still family in a way. We have children together. Children you've poisoned against me for 8 years, I noted. He waved his hand dismissively. Water under the bridge. The point is, I'm in a bit of a situation right now, temporary cash flow issues. Nothing serious, but the timing is tight. And you're clearly doing well, he continued smoothly. This place must have cost, what, $700,000? More? I'm just asking for a short-term loan. Family helping family. I stared at him, astonished by his audacity. You're not my family, Richard. You haven't been for 8 years, and we both know your temporary cash flow issues involve multiple mortgages, possible securities fraud, and emptying our children's college funds. His face darkened. Tyler and Madison have been talking. I see. Ungrateful after everything I've done for them. You mean after you gave them their own money and claimed it was yours? After you lied about me receiving alimony? After you intercepted gifts I sent them? For a moment, genuine confusion crossed his face. How do you know about? He stopped himself. But it was too late. About the gifts? Ryan told me. He's been quite informative about all your manipulations. Richard stood, his charm evaporating. Ryan always was weak. Too much like you, sentimental, impractical. No, Richard. Ryan is honest and decent, 2 qualities you wouldn't recognize if they hit you in the face. His mask slipped further. You have no idea what I've been through, trying to maintain the lifestyle our children deserve while you played the martyr in your shabby apartment. Do you think it's easy keeping up appearances? Meeting expectations? Whose expectations? I asked. Natalie's? Your golf club friends? Because your children didn't need a father drowning in debt to impress his younger wife. They needed a father who told them the truth and encouraged their relationship with their mother. Don't you dare bring Natalie into this, he snapped. Why not? You brought her into our marriage readily enough. His face flushed with anger. You always were bitter. No wonder the kids preferred me. They preferred you because you bought their affection with lavish gifts and turned them against me with lies, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. Tell me, does Natalie know you're facing bankruptcy? Does she know about the investigation into your investment practices? Fear flickered across his face, the first genuine emotion I'd seen. Those are baseless rumors. Are they? Because I have copies of the subpoenas delivered to your former firm. Would you like to see them? This was a bluff. Ryan's contact had mentioned an investigation but provided no documents. Still, Richard's reaction told me everything I needed to know. You've always been vindictive, he snarled, abandoning all pretense of civility. I'm offering you a chance to help your children's father in a difficult time, and you're throwing it in my face. I smiled without warmth. Oh, Richard, you haven't been concerned with being my children's father for years. You've been concerned with being their banker and their puppet master. I walked to my desk, retrieved a small digital recorder, and pressed stop. By the way, I've recorded this entire conversation, including your admission about intercepting gifts meant for our children. His eyes widened in shock. You can't, that's illegal. Actually, in this state, single-party consent is perfectly legal for recordings. Something you'd know if you'd paid attention during our divorce instead of trying to bully me into submission. Richard's face contorted with rage. He stepped toward me, fists clenched, and for a moment I feared he might become physically threatening. You manipulative bitch? You think you can threaten me? I built everything we had while you played house. I made our children successful while you graded papers. I am still the head of this family. There is no our family anymore, Richard, I replied, forcing myself to stand my ground despite his intimidating posture. There's my relationship with my children, which you've poisoned, and there's your relationship with them, built on lies and manipulation. He moved closer, his breathing heavy, when the front door opened and Ryan walked in carrying groceries. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, his eyes darting between us, clearly sensing the tension. Richard stepped back immediately, his public mask sliding back into place. "Just having a chat with your mother. Nothing to concern yourself with." "Really? Because it looked like you were about to hit her," Ryan said, setting down the bags and moving to stand beside me. "Don't be ridiculous," Richard scoffed, though the guilt on his face was evident. "I would never." "Maybe you should leave, Dad," Ryan suggested, his voice firm. Richard looked between us, realizing he had lost this battle. "This isn't over, Allison. Not by a long shot." He grabbed his keys from the counter. "And Ryan, we'll discuss your disloyalty another time. Looking forward to it," Ryan replied coolly. After Richard stormed out, tires squealing as he left my driveway, I sank onto the sofa, adrenaline draining from my body. "Are you okay?" Ryan asked, sitting beside me. I nodded, still processing what had just happened. "Did you hear much of that?" "Enough to know Dad hasn't changed," he said grimly. "I recorded some of it on my phone from the entryway. Between your recording and mine, Madison and Tyler need to hear this." The confrontation had revealed Richard's seventh betrayal. His admission that he had deliberately poisoned our children's relationship with me, intercepting gifts and communications while presenting himself as the generous, loving parent. That evening, after Ryan left to meet friends, I sat on my deck watching the sunset over the ocean. The confrontation with Richard had been frightening, but also strangely liberating. For years, I had been afraid of his anger, his manipulation, his power over our children. Today, I had stood my ground and seen the truth. Richard was a desperate, failing man whose empire of lies was crumbling. The battle wasn't over, Madison, and Tyler still had to fully confront the truth about their father, but for the first time in 8 years, I felt like victory was possible. Not just for me, but for my children who deserved to break free from the web of manipulation that had entrapped them for so long. The morning after Richard's confrontation, Ryan and I made copies of both recordings and sent them to Madison and Tyler, along with a simple message: "Listen to these. Then decide what kind of relationship you want with both your parents going forward." I didn't expect immediate responses, and none came. Ryan returned to his apartment in the city with a promise to check in regularly, and I went back to my teaching job, trying to focus on my students' needs rather than the family drama unfolding in the background of my life. 3 days later, my phone rang during my lunch break. It was Madison. "I listened to it," she said without preamble, her voice tense. "Twice." "And?" I asked, my heart racing. A long pause followed. "And I need to think. It's not what I expected. It wasn't forgiveness or an apology, but it was acknowledgement, the first step towards something better than what we'd had." That evening, as I graded essays on my deck, watching waves crash against the shore, Tyler's car pulled into my driveway. Unlike his previous visit, he came alone, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more hesitant. "I didn't call first," he said as I met him at the door. "I was afraid I'd lose my nerve." I invited him in, offered him coffee, which he accepted, and we sat at my kitchen table in awkward silence for several minutes before he finally spoke. "Dad called me yesterday," he began, staring into his mug. "He said you and Ryan were conspiring against him, that you doctored those recordings." "And what do you think?" I asked quietly. Tyler looked up, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time since the divorce. "I think that was his voice on those recordings, saying things I've never heard him say before, things that explain a lot." Over the next 2 hours, Tyler and I had the most honest conversation we'd had in 8 years. He told me how Richard had controlled him through money and approval, funding business ventures only to micromanage them into failure, then leveraging that failure to maintain Tyler's dependence. Every time I tried to break away, he'd remind me of how much he'd given me, how I owed him loyalty, Tyler explained. "When he told us you'd bought this place, he made it sound like you'd been hoarding money for years while he struggled to support us. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment and drove a 12-year-old car," I reminded him gently. "I know," Tyler sighed. "I should have questioned it. But Dad has always been so convincing, so absolute in his version of reality. That was always his greatest talent," I agreed, making his perspective seem like the only possible truth. As our conversation continued, Tyler revealed how his business ventures had all been extensions of Richard's control ideas Richard had pushed, funded with strings attached, then undermined when Tyler showed too much independence. "I haven't had a real job in 8 months," he admitted, shame coloring his face. "The startup was my last attempt to prove myself to him. When it failed, I couldn't admit it to anyone, not even your siblings. Madison would have just told me to try harder, be more like Dad. And Ryan." He trailed off. "Ryan and I haven't really talked, not honestly, in years." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You're more than your father's expectations, Tyler. You always have been." Tears welled in his eyes, the first I'd seen from him since he was a teenager. "I'm so sorry, Mom. For believing him. For how I treated you. For Mother's Day. God. All those Mother's Days." I squeezed his hand, my own eyes filling. "You're here now. That's what matters." By the time Tyler left that evening, we hadn't solved everything, but we had made a start. He promised to come back the following weekend to continue our conversation and to bring some of his genuine business ideas, not Richard's, for my honest feedback. Madison proved more resistant. Though she had listened to the recordings, years of being Richard's favored child had created deeper bonds of loyalty. 2 weeks after sending the recordings, I received a text asking if she could visit. When she arrived, her expression was guarded, her body language defensive. Unlike Tyler's emotional breakthrough, Madison remained composed, analytical. She had questions about specific financial details, dates of events, documentary evidence of my claims. It was like being cross-examined by a hostile attorney which, given Madison's law school background, wasn't far from the truth. "I need you to understand something," she said after an hour of tense discussion. "Even if everything you've said is true, even if Dad did manipulate us, you gave up too easily." The accusation stung. "What do you mean?" "You should have fought harder," she insisted, tears finally breaking through her composed facade. "You should have shown up at the house, confronted Dad directly, taken him to court something. You just accepted that we were gone." This was Madison's pain, speaking the abandoned daughter who had needed her mother to move mountains to reach her. In her mind, my acceptance of the situation, my retreat into my teacher's life, had been confirmation of Richard's narrative that I didn't care enough. "I called every week for 3 years," I said quietly. "I sent letters, gifts. I drove to your college campus and waited outside your dorm. But you wouldn't come down." "You should have tried harder," she repeated, her voice breaking. "A mother who really wanted her children would have done more." "What would have been enough, Madison?" I asked, my own pain finally surfacing. "Should I have quit my job to pursue you full-time? Bankrupted myself fighting endless legal battles? Stalked your father's house until he had me arrested? What would have proven my love to you?" She had no answer, only tears. "I fought as hard as I could, while still remaining someone you could respect when you were ready to see me again," I continued gently. "I kept myself whole and built a life you could be part of when you were ready." "And if we never came back?" she challenged. "Then at least one of your parents would have been stable, sane, and ready to welcome you without conditions," I replied. "That was the best gift I could give you while respecting your choices." By the end of our conversation, Madison hadn't fully reconciled with me, but cracks had appeared in her armor. She admitted that Richard had pressured her to maintain distance from me, that he had reacted with cold fury the few times she'd mentioned wanting to visit me. "I knew something was wrong with how he talked about you," she admitted as she prepared to leave. "But it was easier to go along with it than to question everything." The breakthrough moment came unexpectedly, as Madison was gathering her purse to depart. "He intercepted the necklace, didn't he?" she asked suddenly. "What necklace?" I asked, confused. "For my 25th birthday. I found a jeweler's receipt in your name when I was helping Dad clear out his home office last year. It was for a sapphire pendant, my birthstone. But I never received it. When I asked Dad about it, he said you must have returned it." My heart clenched at the memory. "I saved for months for that necklace. I had it engraved with your initials and birth date." Madison's face crumpled. "He kept it from me. He deliberately kept your gift from me and lied about it." This 8th betrayal, learning that Richard had intercepted not just regular mail but significant gifts meant for special occasions, was what finally broke through Madison's defenses. As painful as it was to see her heartbroken, It was also the moment truth finally outweighed loyalty to her father's lies. 3 weeks later, all 3 of my children came to dinner at my beach house not for an ambush or manipulation, but for a genuine attempt at family healing. Without spouses or partners, just the 4 of us sat around my dining table for the first time in nearly a decade. "I'd like to make a toast," Ryan said, raising his glass. "To Mom, who never gave up on us even when we gave her every reason to. And to second chances," Tyler added. "God knows we all need them." Madison, still the most reserved of the 3, simply said, "To truth." However painful it might be, as we clinked glasses, I felt something long broken beginning to mend. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. The road ahead would still have difficult moments. Richard's influence couldn't be erased overnight, but the journey back to family had finally begun. 1 year later, on Mother's Day, I woke to the sound of voices in my kitchen. For a brief, disoriented moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then I remembered my children had arrived the night before, all 3 of them coming to spend the weekend at my beach house. I padded downstairs in my robe to find Ryan flipping pancakes while Tyler arranged fresh fruit on a platter. Madison was setting the table on the deck, the morning sun illuminating her face as she carefully placed flowers in a small vase. "Happy Mother's Day," they called in unison when they saw me, their smiles genuine, their eyes clear of the suspicion and calculation that had marked our reunion a year earlier. "We thought you deserved breakfast in bed," Ryan said apologetically. "But you woke up too soon." "This is better," I assured them, taking in the scene of my children working together in my kitchen. "Much better." Over breakfast on the deck, with the ocean providing a peaceful backdrop to our conversation, we talked about the year that had passed, a year of healing, revelation, and significant changes for all of us. Richard's carefully constructed facade had finally collapsed completely. The financial investigation Ryan had mentioned had resulted in charges of securities fraud and misappropriation of client funds. His firm had severed all ties, leaving him to face legal consequences alone. "His assets are frozen pending the outcome of the trial," Madison explained. As an attorney herself, she understood the implications better than any of us. "Natalie filed for divorce 3 months ago when she realized there was no money left. She's dating her personal trainer now," Tyler added with a wry smile. "Apparently, it was going on for quite a while." "Are you in contact with your father?" I asked carefully. Throughout the year, I had been conscious of not trying to dictate my children's relationship with Richard. Despite everything, he was still their father. "Limited," Madison replied, her expression complicated. "I visited him a few times. He's different now. Humbled, maybe. I send emails," Tyler said. "But I've maintained distance. The therapist I've been seeing helped me realize how toxic his influence was on my self-worth." Tyler's journey over the past year had perhaps been the most dramatic. After acknowledging the failure of his last business venture, he had taken a job with a startup incubator, using his experience to help other entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes he had made. For the first time, he was building a career based on his own talents rather than trying to imitate his father's path. "I haven't spoken to him since Christmas," Ryan admitted. "He still tries to manipulate the conversation every time. I'm not closing the door forever, but I need more time." Our family healing hadn't been limited to our relationship with Richard. The bonds between siblings had required mending as well. Madison and Tyler had needed to confront how they had enabled each other's rejection of me, while Ryan had harbored resentment toward his older siblings for their treatment of both him and me. "Remember that awful family dinner last year?" Madison asked, wincing at the memory. "When Bradley got drunk and revealed the whole plan?" "Hard to forget," I replied dryly. Though I'm grateful for his loose lips in retrospect, Madison's relationship with Bradley had been another casualty of the year's revelations. As she'd begun to recognize the patterns of manipulation in her father's behavior, she'd started to see similar traits in her husband. "The divorce will be finalized next month," she said, her voice stronger than I would have expected. "It was the right decision, Mom. I was turning into Dad, marrying someone I could control, someone who would make me look successful rather than someone who made me happy. I'm proud of you," I told her, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. That took tremendous courage. After breakfast, my children presented me with thoughtful gifts, not the expensive, impersonal items Richard might have encouraged, but presents that showed they had been paying attention to who I really was. Ryan had recorded a collection of songs he'd written, including one called Mother's Patience that brought tears to my eyes. Tyler had framed a photograph of the four of us from his high school graduation, the last family event, before the divorce, alongside a recent photo taken at Christmas, the contrast between them a visual representation of our journey. Madison gave me a sapphire pendant, similar to the one I had once bought for her that never arrived. I found the original receipt when we were clearing out Dad's things, she explained. I had the jeweler make a replica. I thought we could both have one, a reminder of what was lost and what's been found. As we spent the day together walking on the beach, cooking dinner as a family, and sharing stories on the deck as the sun set, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought us to this moment of healing. Richard's ultimate fate was still unfolding legal troubles, financial ruin, and the collapse of the carefully cultivated image he had maintained for decades. There was no satisfaction in his downfall, only sadness for the man who had sacrificed authentic connection for the illusion of control. Madison had learned to recognize the unhealthy patterns she had absorbed from her father, choosing authenticity over appearance in both her professional and personal life. She had recently started dating again this time, a kind-hearted high school teacher who reminded me a bit of myself at that age. Tyler had abandoned the desperate pursuit of his father's approval, finding satisfaction in honest work rather than grandiose schemes. His genuine business acumen, freed from Richard's sabotaging influence, had begun to flourish in ways that surprised even him. Ryan had strengthened his music career, his band securing a small record deal that allowed him to quit his retail job. He had also become the family connector, the one who maintained communication and organized our gatherings with gentle persistence. And I had learned that standing up for myself didn't mean losing my children, in fact. It had been the key to eventually winning them back. My beach house had transformed from a symbol of my isolation to the family gathering place I had always dreamed of creating. As we posed for a family photo on the beach that evening, I contrasted it with the old family photos where Richard had always placed himself center stage, relegating me to the periphery. In this new configuration, we stood as equals, parent and adult children who had chosen to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of truth rather than manipulation. Same time next year? Ryan asked, as the weekend drew to a close and they prepared to return to their respective lives. And Thanksgiving and Christmas, Madison added. I think we have a lot of holidays to make up for. Tyler hugged me tightly before leaving. Thank you for not giving up on us, Mom. Even when we gave up on you. After they had gone, I sat on my deck alone, but not lonely. Not anymore. The ocean stretched before me, vast and constant, like the love I had maintained for my children through 8 years of rejection. Sometimes, I realized, losing what you thought was important status, financial comfort, the appearance of a perfect family leads to discovering what truly matters, authentic connection, inner strength, and the kind of love that waits patiently for truth to finally prevail. Thank you all for listening to my story. It's been a long journey from those lonely Mother's Days to where I am now. I'd love to hear about your experiences with family estrangement and reconciliation. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship that seemed beyond repair? Share your stories in the comments below. If you found something meaningful in my experience, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family stories. And if you know someone who might be spending Mother's Day alone this year, please share this video with them. Sometimes knowing you're not alone in your struggle makes all the difference. Wishing you all the healing and family connection you deserve, whether it's with the family you were born into or the one you've created for yourself. Until next time.